Can you explain why delay and dragging these things out helps the insurance companies or the PCF, whatever entity has to pay?
Well, like in today's environment, or actually throughout medical malpractice, Louisiana has the Patients Compensation Fund, PCF, who's supposed to pay legitimate claims on behalf of victims of medical negligence. It's called the Patients Compensation Fund. I call it the doctors or hospitals
protection fund.
Yeah, protection fund. That's a better word because that's what happens. And look, that fund is like a Wall Street investment type firm these days. They have over $2 billion, and to try and get them to pay a legitimate claim, even if you know and the doctor has admitted he's done wrong or the hospital has admitted they've done wrong, they still fight you and won't pay for victims because they get to keep their money in the bank, and they keep
or in the stock market,
and keep it as long as they can, and they're growing. Again, it's almost like a hedge fund.
Welcome to Bayou Justice, Breaking Victims, Protecting Power. I'm your host, Chip Wagar, a medical malpractice attorney dedicated to reforming Louisiana's healthcare laws. On this show, we dive deep into the challenges faced by patients in our state, exploring how current laws often favor institutions over individuals. Each episode will bring you compelling stories from victims, insights from legal experts, and perspectives from lawmakers. Join us as we work to shed light on these issues and push for meaningful change in the Bayou State.
Welcome to Bayou Justice, Breaking Victims, Protecting Power, a production of the Louisiana Patient Rights Advocacy Forum. And I want to welcome today an old friend, Mr. Chris Roy, who has had a very distinguished legal career and also political career. I don't know if you use the word distinguished with political careers, do you?
Well, you're giving me a lot more credit than maybe I'm due, but I did have a short political career that I enjoyed, and part of it was trying to help victims of nursing home abuse and neglect, and as well as medical malpractice victims too. So that was a rewarding part of what I did in the legislature from 2008 to 2012, and ended up not running again. I had two sons playing baseball at the time and in high school, and was missing a lot of what they were doing, and it didn't work out for me to keep going.
Chris, you went to LSU undergraduate, I think, and Southern Law School 1987, graduated cum laude, as I understand.
Yeah.
You law clerked for Judge Robert Jackson for a time, I think, and then you began practicing with your father. We should mention you come from a legal family, don't you?
I do, and as a matter of fact, when our daughter got married, she's a lawyer as well. My two sons are. We took a group picture at the wedding of all the lawyers between cousins.
Did you use the wide angle lens?
Yeah, my dad's, he's, fortunately for us, he's still here. He's going to be 89 years old. He'd still love to practice. And I got my start, I guess, because I am a third generation lawyer. My grandpa was a lawyer, but my dad was an attorney who did medical malpractice work. And when I got through clerking for Judge Jackson, at that point, I wanted to follow in his footsteps, went to work with him, and then ultimately kind of formed my own firm. And in the, I guess, late 90s, Chip, kind of gravitated towards helping victims of nursing home neglect. I was in a seminar in Washington, D.C., and I met a fantastic nurse who was involved on the cutting edge of helping victims of abuse and neglect with remedies, so to speak. She was actually involved in helping write some of the laws that protect elderly citizens as of this date, and I got involved with her, and then it kind of worked itself from there into doing more general medical malpractice in addition to the nursing home work. And I kind of felt like told me, you're going to need a niche. And thinking about our elderly citizens who were in a place, sometimes nobody to help them, and were being, having terrible bed sores or falls and fractures, sometimes death from
malnutrition.
choking, malnutrition, those things made me say, look, you know what? I've been given a blessing to be an attorney. I was taught the right way by my dad to help others, and that's what I believe in, and that's where I went. And it's been a rewarding experience ever since.
It is, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So tell us how, what your first medical malpractice case was about, and what surprised you about Louisiana's medical malpractice system when you first started getting into it.
Like I said, I had grown up with a father who did this type work, and it is a specialized area of the law, as you know, because of the system. The system, in a way, is geared towards the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, and what you realize when you start doing the cases is that they're tough. Not all lawyers can do them. It's a field that you got to learn medicine. Obviously, you're going to fight with people who are professionals, and sometimes that gets pretty exhausting. But what I'm trying to remember, some of the first cases probably were with my dad, and then I realized, what's this medical malpractice system? What's this all about, where before you can even go to court, you have to go through a medical review panel in which doctors decide whether another doctor did something wrong. And I equate it, and everybody knows this saying, but it's the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak. Well, actually, it's not. It's the hens guarding the hens. And look, Chip, no other profession, if I mess up, a client can take me to court. If an architect messes up, can take them to court. If a CPA messes up, can take them to court. In our system, as you know, you have to go through a panel system, which is an elaborate, long process, and 9.5 times out of 10, the system's rigged against the person, and you can't get into court before you go through that system.
Tell me, not a lot of lawyers do medical malpractice in Louisiana. Why is that, do you think? Why is it so hard for victims of medical malpractice to find a lawyer who's willing to take their case?
Well, I think from my experience, it's prohibitively expensive.
Why do you say that?
Because in order to win the case, you have to have an expert witness to be able to testify against the doctor or the hospital. And
we're talking a medical doctor in most
yes,
cases.
Yeah, and
at least one.
Yes, and they're not cheap, and they're oftentimes they don't want to get involved. Even your own treating physician, for instance, who may know something was done wrong by another doctor, doesn't want to mess up the apple cart, so to speak. So it's hard to get them. So you have to go finding experts who are willing to testify, and they unfortunately don't come cheap, but you have to do it. And
they're from out of state usually.
They're from out of state, but not only that, it's as I was alluding to earlier, it's a two-pronged system. You can't just go to court. You have to go through a medical review panel, which during my time of practice, which has now been 37 years, this has changed. In other words, you used to go through this panel system pretty quickly. By law, you should be out of there by either a year or 18 months, but somehow these things are lasting 3 and 4 years because the doctors and hospitals defending these cases are now making you go through almost a trial process before you can ever get into the court. So that's lawyers won't take them because they know it's double the work that they'll have to do, and it's a very difficult road to go down.
Now, there's a thing called the float in insurance about the time the premium is taken in to when the claim is paid out. Most people think that that's where insurance companies make their money, but it's not, is it? It's the investment in the interim of that money before they have to pay the claims. That's where the money gets made, isn't it?
Yes, that's
right. The float that people talk about. Why? Can you explain why delay and dragging these things out helps the insurance companies or the PCF, whatever entity has to pay?
Well, like in today's environment, or actually throughout medical malpractice, Louisiana has the Patients Compensation Fund, PCF, who's supposed to pay legitimate claims on behalf of victims of medical negligence. It's called the Patients Compensation Fund. I call it the doctors or hospitals
protection fund.
Yeah, protection fund. That's a better word because that's what happens. And look, that fund is like a Wall Street investment type firm these days. They have over $2 billion, and to try and get them to pay a legitimate claim, even if you know and the doctor has admitted he's done wrong or the hospital has admitted they've done wrong, they still fight you and won't pay for victims because they get to keep their money in the bank, and they keep
or in the stock market,
and keep it as long as they can, and they're growing. Again, it's almost like a hedge fund.
So there's no incentive for the insurance companies or the patient compensation fund to get to the end of the claim.
I don't think so. And look, oftentimes I can give you an example in the cases that I have from a nursing home environment. Most of the time, because it was an elderly person, that person is now deceased. So they don't have to worry about paying any of their medical bills or anything like that. And so typically the family members who are bringing suit for the loss of their mom or dad are older people. And so they just feel like, well, we'll just wait them out. We'll make their lives miserable. We'll make it as hard to get paid or get justice as we can. And maybe they'll just finally give up and take a pittance of what their case would be worth, unless lawyers like you and I and others who we know do this kind of stand our ground and say, no, you're going to be treating our clients fairly.
It's been said that victims of medical malpractice in Louisiana actually have less rights than any other state in the union because of what's been known as the trifecta. You've mentioned one of them, the medical review panel system. There are caps on damages, hard caps, and then there's this future medical trust fund.
Right.
Do you think there is any, or do you know of any other state that has harsher, more restrictive laws than Louisiana?
I don't know of any other state, but I know there are other states with caps, obviously, but not caps, review panel, and then what you alluded to about involving the trust fund to pay future medical. But I'll give you an example in my world, and especially from the nursing home negligence standpoint. Last year, the industry, and I call it an industry, came up with a bill that they want to insulate themselves and put into medical malpractice what I believe are administrative type claims. For instance,
fraud.
Yes, a nursing home has to have a minimum of 8 hours a day of RN nursing, excluding the DON. If they don't have that, they're breaking Louisiana law. And I'll promise you 90% of them are following a model that they're not doing that. So why are they doing it? Who's doing it? It's the administration. It's the owners. And by the way, Chip, I don't want to say everybody's bad, but these owners are not hurting. They're not hurting when they're flying around in Learjets to their homes in Aspen, and they're headed off to their homes in Watercolor and things like that. So, but they want to insulate themselves when they won't even hire the right number of nurses who can assess your mother, your father, and make sure that they're not getting bed sores and dying. And that's what's really the salt in the wound, so to speak. It's just that they're now wanting to pass a law to give themselves protection from administrative decisions they make to not have enough nursing
for profit,
and call that medical malpractice. No, when you make a conscious decision not to hire enough CNAs, not to hire enough nurses to take care of mom or dad, that's not malpractice. But yet that's the law they want to put into place. And guess what? Unless people call their legislators and say, no, quit, don't allow this. And we beat it back last year. It was known as the Bob Dean Protection Act. But they're coming back, and they're already going around the state talking to all the legislators, telling them how much money they're losing and how non-profitable they are, which is frankly a lie.
So if they were to succeed in doing that, basically they're avoiding the consequences of their understaffing, undersupplying, low standards of medical care. They're avoiding the consequences of their own business decisions to make more profits than they would otherwise make.
That's right. And to bring it back to your initial question about, are our laws unique? In fact, Louisiana would be the only state in the union to call non-staffing, failing to hire enough nurses, call that medical malpractice. But that's the greed. That's the greed. And I hate, look, people are going to say, oh, he's hyperbolic. No, it's greed. It comes down to that, and it comes down to our system, CMS, Medicaid, paying these folks our tax dollars to not do what by law they're supposed to do.
Let me ask you a more general question. Louisiana's nursing homes are consistently ranked in the United States in the high 40s, if not the worst in the country, and have been for many years. True?
True. That's right.
Do you think there is a connection between having weak medical malpractice laws and privileged protections for nursing homes and the low quality of care elders get in Louisiana?
Yes, I definitely think so. Look, it's all a symbiotic relationship. To turn it to malpractice and what happens in nursing homes. 25 years ago, nursing homes were not considered part of the Medical Malpractice Act, but they beat our legislature down to say, oh, we need these cap protections, we need this. So they get all of these protections, so they're all in it together. Look, when I was in the legislature, I was asked by a number of healthcare providers and other folks, hey, can you help us solve what we know to be a wrong, that this cap in place since 1970 of 500,000 that Louisiana has, we know that's too low, but we want some other concessions. So I said, sure, I want what's best for our citizens.
Half a loaf is better than none.
Right. We'll raise that cap if we need to correct some other things that you believe are bad. But Chip, I told after about a year of, it was like herding cats. These people, the healthcare industry is together until one of them needs something that the other one doesn't want. But it all basically comes back down to funding. There are only so many dollars in the state that are Medicaid dollars and or Medicare dollars. And so at the end of the day, they're going to fight to see who can get the most of those dollars. And that's why you could never get some reform of our system, because you can't get the group in bed. If the hospitals wanted it, the nursing homes didn't, because again, they're fighting over some of the same dollars.
I think people can look this up. The Secretary of State of Louisiana maintains a list of all paid lobbyists. You have to be registered with the Secretary of State. And I think if people look it up and count, my last look at it, there was 82 lobbyists, registered lobbyists, representing one or more, and sometimes many more, healthcare providers, hospitals, nursing homes, the medical society, and none representing patients, none. No. What's it like to be in the legislature in that kind of environment when it comes to patient safety and patient rights in Louisiana? What's it like?
I can give you my experience, and again, that was 2008 to 12, but I'm sure it's pretty much the same.
Hasn't changed much.
No, it hasn't changed much, and what's funny about it is, yes, there are that many lobbyists from that side bombarding you with, I'll give you an example. The nursing home group, the nursing home, whatever they call themselves, association, they have got laws in place that don't allow competition. You can't build any more nursing homes, and so that prevents people who may have a better mousetrap, a better idea, from coming in and saying, let's do it this way. But what it's like is this. Even when I was there, we were beating back some, in my opinion, bad bills for patients and residents of nursing homes. And we had, at that time, we had AARP, which was, for elderly. But look, pretty soon it became apparent that even AARP, who had a lobbyist or two, they couldn't compete with the 80, as you say. AARP doesn't have a Cinco de Mayo day like the nursing home group does when all the legislators show up and get their free food and liquor. Thank God I didn't go to that one, but in any event, they don't have that. People who are victims of abuse, neglect, medical malpractice, they don't have a lobbyist or 15 lobbyists or 80 lobbyists who are able to fight for them. They have to rely on our court system, our civil justice system, and unfortunately, our civil justice system is now going to be the next thing under attack because they know lawyers like you and I who are willing to take them on, if we can destroy the system that's allowing us to do it and make it much harder, taking it back to your original point, then far less lawyers will want to do what we do.
I think just maintaining the system as it is sending it slowly toward extinction, isn't it? Because in 1975, when the law was passed, and we should say the cap for the wrongdoer, the hospital or the nursing home, is only $100,000. Yeah. That today would be worth close to $500,000. And the $500,000 cap, if you do the math, and the inflation since 1975 would be worth about $2.75 million. Right. Okay. So if you don't change that, let's just take the $500,000. You and I take a case. We're going to spend a lot of money on medical experts, depositions, court costs, and so on and so forth. I don't know about you, but if the case goes to trial, we're up to probably 75, 80,000. I've been over 100,000
sure.
at times. And I charge a contingency fee because most of my clients are not able to afford, to finance a lawsuit like that or pay me for my time on an hourly basis. So you take that $500,000 and you take the attorney's fees and expenses out of it for a catastrophically injured person.
Yeah.
So how much longer can we go on like this?
I'm kind of giving it thought as we're sitting here, and I think about a case that just got resolved for some clients where a father lost his wife, who was 33 years old, and she was also a breadwinner. She had 3 young children, lost his wife to medical malpractice, and yet those children who will never see their mom again, they can't recover for the money she would have made in her lifetime to have educated those children. Now, had it been a car wreck or something, yes, you can do it, but in malpractice, it's capped. So here are 3 children and a husband, good folks, good Christian family in my area, which is central Louisiana, who lost their mom. And the most they could have recovered was $500,000, even though the mom herself was a nurse and a breadwinner with the dad and would have been supporting those children. So,
and they're not even going to get that $500,000
No.
after you take the expenses and fees
and
out.
So, how is that fair? I think, Chip, as we sit here today and we talk about this, it comes down to one word: fairness. And, when are we going to inject some fairness in this system that gives us a level playing field? My wife drove down with me, and because we have children here in New Orleans, we wanted to visit them and my grandson. And
I should have said at the beginning, your law office is in Alexandria,
Yes,
Louisiana. You said central Louisiana is your home area and so forth.
And I think about her. She was, before she was really, when we started having children, and she took care of doing that for my family, our family. She was a paralegal in a law firm that defended these cases. And I remember her telling me one time about a victim who was getting a surgery, and I may be saying some of these things wrong, but they cauterize certain things with a device called a Bovie device, I think. And the surgeon literally burned this guy's insides up with this, because he
Bovie scalpel, yeah.
Yeah, a Bovie scalpel. And, that person, I believe, passed away, but it was an agonizing death over several weeks after this had happened. And he was limited to $500,000, where in many other states it wouldn't have nearly been that sort of limitation. So, the system, I will tell you this, I think many of the healthcare providers know that this is a broken system we're in. They are being bombarded in defense cost. As I alluded to earlier, the 25 years ago, you could get through that panel process pretty quickly because the law said you could and it was supposed to. Now they make me and you go through literally almost a trial just to get through the medical review panel, so we can then have the right to go to court and file a suit.
Now you're a year or two into it.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I came across, an article that I thought was very interesting, because in 1975, which is a little before my time, I wasn't practicing then, or you, but when the law was passed, so there were hearings in the Louisiana legislature. And at that time, in 1975, actually on April 10th of 1975, there was testimony by Mr. Sherman Hodge, who at that time was the Commissioner of Insurance for Louisiana, before the subcommittee of the legislature that was considering the Medical Malpractice Act. I did not know this until recently. So in 1975, Mr. Hodge testified at that subcommittee that the cost of Louisiana's medical malpractice premiums for doctors, hospitals, and so forth ranked 25th in the nation. 30 years later, Louisiana's had the 17th highest medical malpractice premiums in the nation. And 50 years later, according to the Cunningham Group, which is a national insurance brokerage firm for hospitals and doctors and so on and so forth. 50 years on, we have the 8th highest medical malpractice. Now, back in 1975, the rationale, or one of the major rationales for passing this act, was because we had medical malpractice insurance premiums, going out of sight, and doctors were going to be leaving the state, and we were going to have a collapse of the medical malpractice system. All this sounds so familiar, doesn't it? Of some of the things we're hearing today from the insurance industry and so forth. But the facts don't bear that out, do they?
No, they don't. And I'm smiling because, I was still in high school in 75, or about to start high school when this was passed. But again, I told you my dad was a lawyer. He did a lot of this work, and he always told me what you just said, that they came to the legislature, the providers did, and said, oh, if we don't do something, everybody's going to leave, just like you said. And you're hearing the same thing about what's happening in the insurance industry today. Here they are. They don't want to pay when your house floods during a hurricane. They slow play you, don't want to pay you, and now they're saying, oh, it's a crisis. Well,
and the greedy trial lawyers.
Yeah,
it's the greedy trial lawyers.
Yeah, blame it on the lawyers who most people don't want to call. I always tell people, Chip, hey, I hope you never have to call me. But sometimes you do. And sometimes when your home is flooded and catastrophically damaged, and your insurance company where you've been paying premiums for 50 years says, oh, too bad, we'll catch up with you down the road. It's just not right. And that's what you see not only in that real life situation, but you see it in what we're talking about
medical
today,
malpractice.
in medical malpractice. We'll slow play you till you never get anywhere.
Because that wasn't the cause of the insurance company's problems in the mid-1970s, when inflation was in double digits and the stock market was poorly performing and so forth.
Bad investments.
Another one I wanted to ask you, because something you said a moment ago. How many times does a medical malpractice victim come to your office for their first sit down with you and say, I've never sued anyone before in my life?
Probably almost every time, and nor do they want to. But, look, I'll tell you this. I actually am licensed up in Colorado as well. And Colorado has a system in which where a doctor and our hospital or provider can sit down and they try and work it out, and they say, look, yeah, I did do something wrong, and they get to a resolution before it ever gets to a lawsuit, which makes sense. Sometimes it's hard to say you're wrong. I've been wrong many a time, I'm responsible to the clients if I've made a wrong decision that affected their case, and so, that's an example of something that they should be looking at in our legislature, which would allow for quick resolution of cases. But instead, we have a system in which
it drags it out for years and
it drags
years.
It out, and they put doctors some of them who are otherwise good doctors in a database that kind of stigmatizes them, and that's wrong too. And so, we're not in a system that promotes resolution. We're in a system that promotes just, warfare, or just, not getting things resolved.
I wanted to, just a lot of people don't know this, but for lawyers like us, there's no lawyer review panel that prevents you from suing a lawyer who's committed professional malpractice, right?
No.
There's no caps. We have unlimited liability to our clients if we commit professional malpractice.
Right.
And furthermore, if you as a lawyer attempt in a contract, a contingency fee contract, or in any other way to limit a client's rights to get full and fair compensation from you, that itself is a disciplinary offense. You can be fined, suspended, or even lose your license if you even attempt to limit your liability. Right.
Right.
How different from the medical profession is that?
Yeah, and you know, I said that early when we were talking about architects or CPAs or lawyers. Let me give you an example about that system you're talking about where you go through that medical review panel. I have a case in which a woman went in having symptoms of a stroke in an emergency room, and instead of the doctor, and her husband even had enough knowledge to say, my wife's having a stroke, there's a drug called TPA. Can we use it to help prevent a major stroke?
Brain death.
Yes, exactly. And so
paralysis and all kinds of things.
He knows it. They know it. But instead, the doctor starts accusing her of being on drugs, which wasn't, none of which was true. But here's the deal. You go through this medical review panel, and there's a thing called a last known well time. And so last known well time gives you an opportunity to give this drug. Well, there's
a window.
Yes, there's a window. But there's a major dispute between the hospital and the husband as to when the last known well time is. The nurse who wrote it down, who we later found out had been disciplined numerous times for writing down inaccurate information in critical situations, she writes one thing. The husband says, I didn't tell her that. And then I can prove that she didn't write that down till after they left the hospital when, in fact...
Because there are ways we can catch alterations of medical records now.
Later find this out that after she had the major stroke, which was preventable. But here's the thing. They go to this medical review panel. This review panel is not supposed to decide facts by law. They cannot decide that issue I just brought up.
If there's a dispute of fact.
If it's a dispute. Yet they did it anyway. So when I called the doctor on the panel to say, listen, let's talk about this. I want to take your deposition. He then tells me, he says, sir, I'm never going to change my mind. And guess what? I train doctors on panels who are young doctors to how to get on a panel and basically never rule for the plaintiff. And in fact, I found out later, in 60-something cases, he had found for the plaintiff once or twice. That came out in a trial of a colleague who, I said, wait, I've talked to that doctor. And they said, oh, he was here testifying for the defendant, and they lost that case that he testified to. But that's what kind of rigged system we're talking about, Chip, is that here's a guy who basically tells me, one, I'm not open-minded, I'll never consider any other evidence, and then tells me that the jurors who are in this rural parish near me are so stupid anyway, they'll never believe what I'm saying. And I'm like, come on, man, are you really trying to say that you're going to go mislead jurors because you think they're dumb? And I was like, please tell them that in court so we can, we'll see what happens. But again, my point being, the system is that he was teaching doctors how not to rule or be fair to the victim in that system.
So you joined the Patient Rights Advocacy Forum. You're a board member now. Why did you do that, and why did you come here today, and what are you trying to? What would you like people to know?
Yeah, well, actually, I joined after I found out about it because, as a matter, I was trying to form a similar group for victims of nursing home abuse. That we were going to get a grassroots campaign going for that, and then you and I, as you know, we had a case 30-some years ago together, and I've always remembered you, and I remembered that case. And
we were adversaries
right,
back
we were
then.
Adversaries, but friends.
Yes.
But the thing is, when I saw you at a meeting and you told me about this group, I was like, wait a minute, let's all band together our resources. And so now I do medical malpractice. I don't do the number of cases that I used to do. I'll do emergency room medicine, but I do a lot of the nursing home work. And so I realized I was getting together a group of advocates to help them, but you were doing it on the med mal side, and the areas are the same. We're both areas are covered under the Medical Malpractice Act. So at that point, I think you said, or I said, or we both said, hey, let's
join
get
forces.
everybody. Let's
Yeah.
join forces. And again, I think it's what you're doing here today is you can't make change. Change has to come from the bottom. And I mean it from people have to look up one day and say, what's happening here? Why are we in a system? They're the ones who are going to have to call their legislators and say, listen, why is this system the same since 1975? That's 50 years ago.
And why here in Louisiana do we have less rights than the people in any other state?
That's exactly right.
Why do we have less rights than people in
Right.
Texas and Alabama and Florida? And why is there something about us or something about our state that we don't deserve to have the same rights or at least equal rights to everybody else?
But it has to come from the people. I say
Yes.
that it has to come from the people because they don't have those lobbyists. They don't have those people. But what they can do is email their legislator. Give them a story about their neighbor who got messed
Or a
around
loved
by
one,
the
or
system,
someone
or
in
their
their
loved
family.
one. Yes, exactly.
For those who don't engage in politics that much, maybe they vote in elections, but they don't involve themselves in politics as much as you have, or maybe I have. But you've been in the legislature. We've talked about all the lobbyists that the healthcare industry has, all the money that they have, and so on and so forth. And it can give people a feeling that there's no hope and there's no way we can ever overcome that. And they're right, we'll never have the money that they do.
That's right.
But as a legislator, would you tell people the impact and the effect that being contacted by a constituent or someone coming down to see you at your office in Baton Rouge, what kind of impact they can have as compared to paid lobbyists roaming the halls down there?
Chip, it's a huge impact. I remember, just as an example, folks started emailing us about a bill having to do with termites. Well, I didn't even know what was about this termite bill, but I soon learned because I had 100 emails. The thing about it is folks contacting their legislators and emailing and doing it and being reasonable and saying, look, we need to look at this issue makes a huge difference. I'll give you one better. In 2000, we were beating back what I call deform laws. You'll hear insurance reform, all that. No, it's deform. They're taking away your rights. They're deforming the system. And it's not tort reform. It's not medical malpractice reform. It's deform because the people are losing their rights. But I went down with a lawyer from Baton Rouge named Keith Richards, and all we did was bring 20 of our clients who had lost their moms, their moms and dads had been neglected, and they put on T-shirts, and they flooded those committee rooms to where it looked like there were 250, but they were vocal, but they were not out of control. They were respectful, and when they told their stories about what had happened to their loved one, we were able to turn back some laws for several years, but basically then the industry flooded the zone with money, and here's contributions.
So Chip, it's never over.
No, Chip, when I was there, I heard that they had found a legislator and they had just filled the coffers of $100,000 in donations from the industry over the summer so that they could bring these laws and change laws to the detriment of residents and would help them financially. And I got up and I called it out, and I was later told, well, you shouldn't have done that. You can't expose that. And I said, no, I'm going to expose it every time, because that's what needs to happen. The money that comes in and makes policy is just flat out wrong. I mean, it's wrong.
And the only really effective way to combat that is for people to contact their legislators, ordinary people, on the phone, emails, go down to the Capitol, whatever. What I think the message I want to get across to people is that don't give up hope. Do it, because Chris was in the legislature. He'll tell you, and others will tell you, it has an enormous impact, more than the money even, Yeah.
There's no doubt. I think at the end of the day, when you as a legislator get a call, and somebody comes to see you, and look, I had doctors come to see me, doctors' wives come to see me about some of their issues, about funding, and I was as respectful to them as I would be anyone else, because everybody wants to be able to talk to their legislator, but the folks who come down and actually do talk, believe me, it makes a difference. And the fact that you're doing and have set up what you're doing, I think the process is education, and that's where things start.
Thank you. And I wanted to talk about that. I think people assume that people in the legislature know all the laws of Louisiana, the whole law library. They know. No, actually, I've found that when I've talked to legislators, amazingly, a lot of them have no idea that there's a medical malpractice law that limits damages to such a low amount. And in the past, we have tried to pass laws or defeat laws that limit victims' rights in the legislature at the last minute. And legislators don't have the fund of knowledge, the basic knowledge, to put in context or understand what's going on, And so one of the things, as you know, that we're trying to do is to reach out to legislators in the off season and give them a steady messaging and facts that when the time comes in the legislature, it's not a blank slate. They do know what's wrong with Louisiana's Medical Malpractice Act, and they can understand the proposals that are being made by the insurance industry, but also by patient advocates like us.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It doesn't just use common sense. If there were laws passed in 1975 with a cap of $500,000, and that has never been raised for inflation, and I think you said the number, it's maybe that $500,000 in today's dollars is about $2.75 million. Look, you can't get an egg. You can't get an egg for the same price.
Eggs are $1. Eggs are $1 in 1975, and lately $12.
Yeah. So why should we not have a system in which the cap, if you're going to give a cap, and there's frankly, some states have caps, but they have it for different reasons. Some states don't cap economic damages,
and there's over 20 states that have no caps at all.
Yeah, like your lost wages and stuff. So, the fact of the matter is that at this point, we're trying to show people that a law from 50 years ago, at the very least, needs tweaking. In my mind, there needs to be some major overhauls. I don't think there should be a system in which the persons who have done the injuring get to decide whether they injured the person. You can't be judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak, and that's kind of the system we're living in right now, and it needs to be changed. And people who can bring a story to their legislator and tell them they need to know about that.
A lot of states, I think it's something like 8 or 10 states, have declared similar laws that cap damages to be unconstitutional and have struck them down. Florida struck down theirs, Alabama, Georgia. Arkansas has a constitutional provision in their constitution that bars caps on damages. In all of these states, people in those states have a right to trial by jury in civil cases. We don't have that in Louisiana, do we?
No, we don't.
And so isn't the effect of that essentially that the legislature in 1975, I don't know how many of them are still alive today, 50 years ago, decided how much damages you could have in 2025 without looking at any evidence, without having any idea what your case is about? Isn't that what it boils down to?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it boils down to. And again, I don't think anybody, whatever profession they're in, with the exception of a few, can say that what was good in 1975 needs to remain the same in 2025.
How many of your brothers and sisters in the legislature would want to be paid in 1975 dollars today?
Right, of course, yeah.
Yeah, nobody would. Nobody
Right.
would. Chris, I really want to thank you for coming in today and sharing with our viewers your story and what you've seen as far as medical malpractice goes. And I hope your words of encouragement that it's not all hopeless. We can do something about it, and we need to do something about this law.
Yeah, and I, again, Chip, and I thank you as well. I think a lot of people talk about things, but you're doing it, and you've told me, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you. As we get older, maybe I'm not taking as many cases as I used to. I have a new grandson who's 18 months old. He's here in New Orleans, so I get to come here and visit. And so I don't take as many cases. And I feel like giving back my time in what we're doing here today, hopefully that makes a difference. And I urge people, look, I'm just one person. Listen to what I say. I don't think I've ever made things up just to hear myself talk. Explore what the laws are, check our facts, and then if you're interested, get involved and get your friends and family involved and start letting your legislators know that, hey, we got to make some changes because the system as it stands is not a fair system right now.
Bayou Justice, Breaking Victims, Protecting Power, a production of the Louisiana Patient Rights Advocacy Forum. If you would like to learn more about this subject, please visit our website and join our cause. Our website is patientrightsla.com. And one last thing, Chris, if someone, a viewer in central Louisiana or elsewhere would like to get in contact with you, who should they call or how should they get in contact with you?
Well, I have a website, royinjurylaw.com, and so that'll tell you how to get to me. And if not, it's Chris Roy Jr. Law Corporation if you go the old-fashioned route and look for a phone number. But yeah, that's and I'm not a hard person to find, I'll say that.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching this program. I hope you get involved.
Thank you for listening to Bayou Justice. I hope today's episode has given you valuable insights into the complexities of medical malpractice in Louisiana. If you'd like to learn more about our mission or get involved in our advocacy efforts, please visit patientrightsla.com. Your support can make a real difference in the lives of patients across our state. Remember, together we can create a fairer, more just healthcare system for all Louisianians. This is Chip Wagar, and I'll see you next time on Bayou Justice.